So we've created our initial text animation and we're happy with it. Back to animating, which means turn off the color correction layers and drop the quality back down to a third. And we're going to put in our next word. So because I'm using the extrude plugin, I'm going to copy these, and pretty much for the whole edit, basically what I did is just copy and paste every single layer and just rename them. Let's write hello, my name's Flea. So hello, my transform, Control C, V, names, and last one is Flea transform. Now, if you're using the extrude plugin, your text is not automatically going to parent with a null, so you're just going to have to go into the 3D transform. And I'm also going to turn the warp off because I only want the warp on the gold words. And the my layer is going to use the my transform. So our parent layer is going to be the my transform. And that's exactly what I did in my edit, is copy and paste every layer, link all the text layers to the nulls. I made sure I had named all the layers so it's easy to navigate. But let's get into this second word. So the first thing I'm going to do is press P on the transform layer. I'll close these other layers here, and I'm just going to move it down on the y-axis. So we're going to move down. The animations always look best when we're moving down and rotating. So I'll probably do like some sort of move and rotate. So we'll move this down here, and let's actually rotate this. We can rotate it in the comp here. Let's rotate it this way. And we might actually straighten it up here. So keep in mind, this is messing with the orientation, which in this case might actually be a good thing because our rotation keyframes, we still have this text layer actually animated, which, as I discovered in the end of my edit, isn't actually a bad thing if every layer is animated, because it just looks so much better. Every layer is sort of flowing. I sort of wish I did this in the whole edit. I'm sorry if I'm confusing you guys, because there's just a lot to this, and I'm trying to make these tutorials as simple, as straightforward as possible. But yeah, basically every layer moving actually makes it look better. So I'm probably going to keep this rotation on, maybe dial down the values a little bit. And I'm actually going to move these two layers just forward a few frames so that it doesn't appear on straight away. And now's when we get into the secret sauce. So this is how I do all my camera animations. I'm going to go ahead and create a new null. I'm going to call this camera 1 null 1. Now the cool thing with naming nulls ending in a number is that if you just copy and paste it, the next layer is going to be called camera 1 null 2, and then paste null 3, 4, 5. So they pretty much auto name themselves, which is really nice for organization. So all you really got to do is name the first one. And I'm going to bring this just above the camera here. So the camera is the dark blue layer. The null is the light blue layer. We're going to make sure that null is a 3D layer. So we're going to click the little 3D icon there. And then we're going to grab this little pick whip here, which is the parent, and we're going to drag it to the null 1. So now, as you can see, camera 1 is actually parented to null 1. So now if we move this null, let's say we move the rotation, you can see it's acting as if we're moving the camera. And this is how we can overlap the keyframes of each animation to get that really smooth flow. So the first thing I do on every single word when I'm animating it is I press P and then Shift R, and then I pretty much highlight all the keyframes. I undo the orientation because we don't want to mess with the orientation. And then I'm just going to press U and then press U again. And basically that's just going to show all the keyframes that I have highlighted. I'm going to drag this to the start and maybe go in 3 frames from my camera animation. So that's like a general rule of thumb I like to use. If you look into the My Eyes project file, you can see that I roughly give like 3 frames in between each animation of the null. So I'm going to move 1, 2, 3 frames here, and then I'm going to basically move to my next text layer. So we're going to move down here and we're going to rotate it. And I might actually move this text layer down a little bit. So if I just press P, I go a bit further on the Y there, and then I'm just gonna match it with this null. You can actually hide the null layers as well because it's gonna have that little 3D transform here. You don't want that, so just hide that layer there and just go down in the null until it's right in the center of my, and you can see how we've only animated 2 keyframes here. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm still just going to click all and highlight all these keyframes here, because if I ever want to go back and change this animation, and let's say I want to move something on the X, if it's not keyframed, it's going to ruin the whole edit. So I make sure I animate all the keyframes, and then I'm going to highlight them. And this is where the flow plugin comes in. And I'm going to click either YOLO or Meta, which are basically these curves. I'm going to go with YOLO, click apply, and let's see how this looks. All right, so it's way too quick. So we're going to drag this out a bit. Highlight, click apply. I might even move forward 1 frame. All right, I'm not really liking the rotation here. I might actually rotate it back this way a little bit. I wonder if I can mess with anything else. Sometimes I just like to sort of mess with it, see if I can get like a look. And once again, when I mess with these values, I always just highlight the batch and click apply. Also, something I've learned spending many hours animating in this style is that it always looks better when the camera moves to the position almost before the text does, because it's almost like it's anticipating where the text is going to go, and it makes for a cleaner animation rather than the camera always animating to where the text is. It's animating to where the text is gonna be, and it creates for a sort of nicer flow with the edit. So I'm actually going to bring this text forward more so the camera animates there, then the text appears. Oh, and I also forgot, I don't want this text yellow, so I'm gonna do text is white and also the 3D is gray. All right, so does this look good? Not really, but here's the thing, it's never gonna look good until you do the next animation. So sometimes you just gotta move on to the next one because the animation is never gonna look good when it's just stopping, you know what I mean? So in order to create that flow, I have to move on. So let's go ahead and turn on this next layer, and we're just gonna actually copy the position of the my, and we're gonna paste it on to the next one. And you can see the text just spawns there. We're actually gonna move the orientation a little bit, and we're gonna move this down as well, and let's create another rotation. Maybe let's keep rotating in that direction. So at the moment we're rotating right. I'm gonna keep that in, and then for the last word, we're gonna rotate left, and it's gonna create like a nice, cool sort of animation. All right, so this is probably the most important part of the whole tutorial. If you take away anything, it's this. What I'm gonna do now is I'm going to Control C and Control V this null. I'm going to press U, and what I'm gonna do is I'm going to go to the end where the keyframes are, and I'm going to turn off all the keyframes. Now basically, null 2 is now starting where null 1 finishes. So I'm going to turn all the keyframes back on, and we now have null 1's ending position is going to be null 2's starting position. So that's basically what I did there when I turned off the keyframes at the end. Now turn them back on, I'm gonna drag these to the start, because once again, the end of null 1 is going to be the start of null 2. We're going to parent null 1 to null 2, and as soon as we do this, look at what happens to null 1. The position values will all go to 0, and that means I've correctly positioned null 2 exactly where null 1 was. And this is the trick that I honestly accidentally stumbled upon when making this edit, and it made this method of animating 3D camera just so much easier than what it was before, because in the other edits, I was struggling with the old method. This new method makes it so much easier. I'm now going to once again highlight all these keyframes here. I'm going to move them over 1, 2, 3, and let's start animating to our next word. So I'm going to go down in the Y position, and we're also just going to rotate a little bit, and I'm just going to play around here and find a nice angle. I think the thing is with this style is that it's never going to look perfect. Even in my main edit, there were still parts of the edit that I didn't really like, but then there's other parts of the edit that just were like the highlight and just looked amazing. So that's just how it's going to be sometimes. Sometimes you'll just nail an animation, it'll look awesome. Sometimes it won't, and I have no idea how this little animation in this tutorial is going to turn out, but this is exactly how I did it in the edit. And once I've got my position, once again, highlight all the keyframes, click apply on flow, it's all done. All right, so that's how it's looking. Let's do the last word, which is flee. So let's get this in here. And like I said before, what I like to do is just copy and paste the XYZ position so that the text is already halfway there to where we want it to be. And then I'm just gonna move the orientation down a bit. I'm gonna throw that down in Y position and just get it in a nice spot. Now what we're gonna do is we're actually gonna reverse the animation. So instead of going to 100%, we're going to go to negative 100%. And what this will do is basically animate the word on backwards. So if we drag this all the way up here, you can see it's now animating from A, E, L, F. So I'm just going to press U because my timeline's getting a bit messy. We're going to copy null 2, paste it, highlight both these layers and press U so we can see what we're doing here. Go to the end, and once again, we're going to turn all the keyframes off on null 3, turn them all back on. We're going to move them to the start. Now we can parent the layer. So parent null 2 to null 3. And as you can see, the position values of null 2 have finished on 0. And now we can freely animate null 3. So we're going to go down here, and we're going to pretty much mess with this. And this time I'm going to rotate in this direction. So I'm going to go back to this 3D text and just rotate it like this and move it over here. And just play around with this as well as the animation until it looks nice. Highlight all the keyframes, click YOLO and apply. 1, 2, 3. And let's see what that looks like. Okay, so that's happening too quick at the end there. So let's maybe move that over one. I think the text is coming on too quickly maybe. So let's move that back maybe a couple frames. I want it to tilt forward a little bit more because I like the reveal of kind of it tilting. That's looking quite nice. Let's see how that looks in motion. All right, and I'm pretty happy with this animation. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn the quality to full and turn on all the layers again. And then let's see how this looks in full quality. All right, that's looking pretty good. I think one thing I will change is I'll just make it so the word names animates on. All right, and that's actually looking pretty good. So it's pretty hard to create an animation when I haven't got a song playing. I just sort of freestyled this. But this is exactly how I created the My Eyes edit. And if you jump into the project file, you can see for yourself, it's exactly what we just did here, but just way more times. And I think the hardest part about this style is just coming up with the idea. Like it's easy to sort of animate down and animate outwards and upwards, but eventually you sort of run out of combinations to do. So I try to do a few unique movements in the edit, and I'm still learning this style, but I thought it was cool enough to share. And because I wanted to sell this project file, I thought I'd also include tutorials for you guys so you can learn exactly how I did it. But that's gonna be it. I hope you learned something, and if you're interested in the 2D text tutorial, I'll see you in the next one.